On March 18, 1992, a brutal incident took place in one of the most tranquil and habitable parts of Victoria, Australia. Geelong West in Victoria, a residential and commercial suburb which provides comfort to families and professionals. Next to both major cities and beaches, it's a place where leisure comes first. In 1992, a violent crime occurred in the Geelong West community, striking 29-year-old Annette Steward inside her own residence on Hope Street. In March 1962, Roy and Margaret Steward welcomed Annette into the world. She grew up and had 2 kids of her own, a 10-year-old son, Aaron, and a 13-year-old daughter, Jacinta, both of who ended up being alone when their mom passed away. Annette used to work at the Winchester ammunition factory in Point Henry. Only a few details about her were disclosed to the general public. Jacinta recalled her as an adoring mom who was always there. Annette was a lovely person with plenty of friends. She was adored by everyone who knew her. Tragically, just 2 weeks before her 30th birthday, her vibrant life was taken from her. On March 17, 1992, at approximately 4:30 p.m., Annette exited the factory and went for shopping with her 4 guy friends in Geelong. On their way back, they enjoyed a cup of tea together. After that, she was all by herself in the house. The following day, on March 18th, a friend who used to be her roommate dropped by and noticed her car parked directly outside. So he walked inside. He had no idea what kind of horrors awaited him inside the house. When he stepped inside to surprise his friend, what he saw was her lifeless, naked body with an electric wire around her neck. He hurried to call the cops right away. The police started an investigation and sent her body for autopsy. It was discovered that she sustained trauma to her head and died from strangulation. Hence, the cause of her death was mentioned to be strangulation. Practically, police had little information during the initial investigation, and the case was abandoned. 15 years after Annette was killed in her house in 2007, Craig Cameron Rogers, a co-worker of hers, was identified as the main suspect by a coroner, Ian West. Rogers' statements to the police did not make him any less of a suspect. Gillian Steward, Annette's sister, expressed her joy about the discovery, saying, "It was everything we expected and good to hear from the coroner." However, no one was charged by the police. They continued to look into the leads and suspects. Nevertheless, none were connected to her dreadful demise. Desperate for a reliable lead, a $1 million reward was offered by the Victoria Police Department in 2015 for any person who may provide the authorities with the information they need. Later, in January 2020, detectives from Victoria and Western Australia established a connection between 2 homicide cases. Consequently, 52-year-old Darren John Chalmers was taken into custody in Perth, Wembley. He was the main suspect in the case of 59-year-old Medina resident Diane Barrett's, who went missing and was later found slain. Following that, he was charged with 1 count of murder in connection with Diane Barrett, and on January 6, 2020, he showed up in court. He claimed that he had dinner at his neighbor Diane's house, after which he invited her to his house for tea, where he jumped her and injected her with methamphetamine. He then strangled her with his hands and a metal bar, all for no reason, he claimed. He disposed of her body and brushed the land. Later, while watching the news about the case on TV with a friend, he casually remarked, "Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery, isn't it?" He was questioned by detectives regarding Annette Steward as well. Eventually, things started to fall into place. The police haven't filed any charges, but they issued a strong statement to the media. The police declared that the investigation would continue for now and that they weren't looking for anyone else. After interrogating him, the police were certain they had found their assailant. Ultimately, in March 2023, the police charged him with Annette Steward's murder after transferring him from Perth to Victoria. During his most recent trial, numerous details of his past were made public. Chalmers was born and raised in Victoria and was declared a state ward as a teenager, according to the information presented to the court. He was then sexually mistreated by both men and women, which had left him with frustration and anger, mostly directed at women who he had been violent towards in the past. Additionally, he was a frequent drug user and would fall into meth-induced rages. In Diane's case, he ended up receiving a life term with the possibility of release in 2040. After conducting a thorough investigation, when the investigators were certain of his involvement in Annette's death, he was remanded in custody preceding his scheduled appearance in Melbourne Magistrates' Courts on March 20th. He made the appearance in court via video link, where he could be seen wearing prison greens and glasses. He was not obliged to make a plea before Guillaume Belin, the magistrate. His trial was scheduled for June 13, 2023, at his next court appearance. As this unsettling saga approaches its resolution, we're compelled to delve deeper into the complexities of Darren John Chalmers' turbulent past and its impact on his heinous acts. How much of his violent behavior can be attributed to the abuse and neglect he suffered during his formative years? Is there a point where one's past ceases to justify present actions? And, pondering the harsh realities he faced, do we as a society hold some responsibility for the individuals we fail? I encourage you to share your perspectives and debate these provocative questions in the comments below. What do you think the upcoming trial unveiled about the nexus between Chalmers' past and his crimes? Let's engage in this discussion as we anticipate the final revelations in this deeply disturbing case. In the quiet morning hours of November 15, 2006, the residents of Kokomo, Indiana, were startled by the sound of gunshots echoing from an apartment on South Armstrong Street. As police rushed to the scene, they were confronted with a sight that would haunt the community and the victim's family for years to come. What events followed the shooting? Who was the victim and what led to this tragic event? Stay tuned to learn what happened next. Howard County is one of 92 counties in the U.S. state of Indiana. The county seat is Kokomo, an idyllic place which makes for a nice family environment. Despite being a small city, Kokomo has an alarmingly high crime rate. Thereby, a 20-year-old boy named Chad Rouse ended up being one of the unfortunate ones who fell victim to the crimes here. On February 8, 1986, in Kokomo, Howard County, Indiana, Frank Rouse and Athena L. Ross welcomed Chad Nicholas Rouse into the world. He had a sister named Heather Rouse, both of whom were raised by their parents. He and Heather had a pleasant and healthy upbringing and were later accompanied by their half-sister, Holly Rouse. Chad went to Kokomo High School, and by the year 2006, he began working in the city of Kokomo Park's maintenance department, marking the beginning of his adulthood. Chad was experiencing the pinnacle of his life around that time. However, during the early hours of November 15, 2006, tragedy struck. Just after 10 in the morning, somebody reported to hearing gunshots coming from an apartment at 1426 South Armstrong Street, close to South Washington and West Offenbaugh, Kokomo. Police officers were dispatched right away. When the police showed up at the crime scene, they were met with Chad's body in a pool of blood. He was unresponsive. Right there, at the scene, Chad was pronounced deceased. An autopsy was conducted which revealed the cause of death to be a single gunshot wound to the back. His death was ruled as a homicide. Someone broke in and shot Chad. The motive, according to the police, was burglary. The police interviewed those nearby, and a female came forward as a witness, providing crucial details about the incident. She informed the police that an unidentified black burglar had broken into the house, which led to a physical altercation between him and Chad. The man was armed with a handgun and held Chad and a woman at gunpoint. During the altercation, Chad was shot in the back. Chad's funeral was held at Eller's Mortuary, Webster St. Chapel, 3400 South Webster Street, Kokomo, in 46902. Throughout the years, the Kokomo Police Department pursued multiple leads and tips. However, everything was futile. Since there were no potential people of interest, the investigation slowed and the case was shelved. Every year on his birthday, Chad's family releases balloons to commemorate his 20 years with them. and on the anniversaries of his demise, lanterns are released. In February 2023, Chad's case was reopened. In an effort to identify the murderer of 20-year-old Chad Rouse in Kokomo, the police asked for information. The very same year, detectives announced that they were almost done with the case and had narrowed it down to just a handful of individuals. Chad's family had been grieving for 16 years, not knowing who killed their beloved, but now they were on the verge of having closure. 2 individuals were named by the authorities as suspects in Chad's slaying: 48-year-old Kevin Maddox and 36-year-old Amber Brigham. What finally helped in identifying Kevin and Amber as the suspects was not disclosed by the investigators. Nevertheless, by the time probable cause affidavit is submitted to the Howard County Prosecutor's Office, more information about the case will hopefully be available. On Friday, May 26, 2023, a Howard County grand jury arraigned both the suspects for their involvement in the crime. On Tuesday, May 30, 2023, arrest warrants for Kevin and Amber were approved by the Howard Superior Second Court. Almost 17 years following Chad's passing, after the warrants had been filed, police apprehended Kevin in Indianapolis and Amber in Miami County. Agencies including the Miami County Sheriff's Department, the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, and the FBI Indianapolis Violent Crimes Task Force all collaborated to investigate Chad's case and bring those responsible to justice. Kevin Maddox faced charges for perpetrating a murder, burglary resulting in serious bodily injury, and conspiracy to commit burglary resulting in serious bodily injury. On the other hand, Amber Brigham received charges for conspiracy to commit burglary resulting in serious bodily injury and aiding, facilitating, and contributing to burglary resulting in serious bodily injury. Both Amber and Kevin are incarcerated at the Howard County Jail. Kevin is being held without bond, but Amber is being held on a $250,000 cash bond with no 10%. This means that even if Amber were to be able to pay the 10% of her total bond amount, she would not be allowed to be released on bail. Thus, for the entirety of their trial, Amber and Kevin would stay behind bars. According to Chad's family, they never imagined this day would arrive. The family claimed that this was not yet over, but they were glad at the possibility of being one step closer to justice. Heather Rouse, Chad's sister, said, "In 16 and a half years, we've missed a lot of good times with him. We're happy, but we're still a little nervous, scared. We definitely need people to still talk." Athena had been grieving the loss of her son Chad for over 16 long years, but at last she is at peace. "I was like, is this for real? Is this really happening? I was just dazed. I was like, I'm not going to believe this until I get to the police station and they tell me," said Athena. In the early hours of a 1998 summer morning, Stephen Davis, a local cab driver in Pensacola, Florida, finished his shift and pulled into a grocery store parking lot, not knowing these moments would be his last. What transpired next left a community in shock and a family searching for answers. Decades passed with more questions than answers. How could a routine night end so tragically? Who would want to harm the well-loved local cab driver? Join us as we unravel a mystery that took years of investigation to bring hope back to a devastated family. 1952 saw the birth of Stephen Davis in Montgomery, Alabama, and next year, the family relocated to Pensacola, Florida. Then in 1970, he completed his high school education there, and in 1985, he graduated from Pensacola Junior College. Stephen tried playing football in high school. Soon after, he hung up the cleats permanently, realizing that he was more of an art person. Additionally, Stephen enrolled in ROTC. Following graduation, he was to join the Army and fight in Thailand during the Vietnam War. Despite being engaged, Stephen never got married or had kids. He was nevertheless very close to his family, particularly his mother and 2 sisters, and paid them frequent visits. He was a very welcoming guy and ready to lend a hand to anyone. He was very compassionate towards others and supported many in quitting drugs. He liked interacting with others, perhaps which inspired him to become a cab driver. He was truly a simple man, didn't care about material stuff, except for his guitar, which he loved to play all the time. On August 26, 1998, almost around 4 a.m., Stephen just got free from a 12-hour shift behind the wheel of his cab. He pulled into the parking lot of a Winn-Dixie grocery store on Navy Boulevard in Pensacola. Just as Stephen was about to leave, an assailant approached his cab and fired 3 shots, hitting him once in the jaw and twice in the back. Stephen got out of the cab, made an effort to call for help, and passed out. There, he succumbed to his wounds. Stephen's yellow station wagon was missing. However, it was later found close by. Both the driver's door and the rear passenger door were unlocked, and the driver's window was broken. At the crime scene, investigators discovered an unidentified fingerprint in a globule of Stephen's blood, but they were unable to provide a match for it at the time, given that they couldn't see the print's detail clear enough. In the days following the shooting, a detailed flyer that provided a thorough description of an individual who was sighted in the vicinity of the scene around the same time circulated. The flyer also mentioned a man who was applying for a job at a nearby place or was already employed there. Stephen's family was devastated by these kinds of details. It was difficult, according to Stephen's sister, to see how much material was available in the case, and still it went cold. It took several attempts over the years to properly study and identify the fingerprint, and investigators hosted several cold case symposiums before eventually the technology improved to that degree. Following a fingerprint match to the evidence recovered from the crime scene on March 5, 2024, the Escambia County Sheriff Chip Simmons announced that 44-year-old Donald Holmes II was deemed guilty of taking Stevens's life. "We knew the blood was Stevens' blood, but we couldn't get the detail we needed from this particular fingerprint. But we tried," Sheriff Simmons stated. "We tried not once, not twice, but 3 different times, because we weren't able to get the details needed to form an adequate identification." Holmes is presently detained at the Mayo Correctional Institution Annex in Mayo, Florida. Furthermore, he was convicted of robbery, fleeing and eluding an aggravated assault in 2014, and is currently serving a 20-year term. He previously spent 17 months in jail for fleeing and eluding police. His initial release date was July 31, 2032, but once convicted of Stevens' murder, he might be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the time of Stevens' demise, he was just 18 years old. June Wilburn, Stevens' mother, died in 2007 without ever finding out who killed her son. Julie MacArthur and Ruby Kastner, Stevens' sisters, attended the news conference where it was announced that Holmes is being charged with their brother's murder. After years of uncertainty and sorrow, the truth behind Stephen Davis's untimely demise finally came to light, bringing a bittersweet sense of closure to his family and the Pensacola community. With Donald Holmes II now facing the full extent of the law, one must wonder what drove a young man to commit such a heinous act on that fateful summer night. And as technology evolves, what other cold cases might soon be unlocked, bringing justice to more families like Stevens? We invite you to share your thoughts and opinions on this case. What do you think could have been the motive behind this tragic event? Are there similar cases that you believe deserve a second look? Join the conversation in the comments below, and don't forget to share this video to keep the discussion going. In Albany, Georgia, a loving family was met with a devastating sight. Yolanda Roundtree, cherished by her community, lay lifeless, partially hidden and wrapped in a blood-soaked sheet. Known for her kindness and warmth, Yolanda had no known enemies, leaving everyone to wonder who could have taken the life of such a beloved grandmother. What dark secrets could lead to such a tragedy, and will the search for answers uncover the truth behind this heartbreaking crime? Albany, located in southwest Georgia, is a vibrant city. The city is a great place to live and draws a lot of tourists, from the rhinos and cheetahs at the Albany Zoo to the Flint River, which the city is situated on. However, despite its natural beauty, Albany also has a history of sinister secrets to its name. 46-year-old Yolanda Roundtree, a bold and tenacious woman, was a pillar of her community and devoted to her people. Yolanda was well known for her kindness and contagious laugh. A loving mother and grandmother, Yolanda would sacrifice anything and everything for her loved ones. Matriarch of her family, she was beloved and respected by her daughters, nieces, nephews, and grandchildren. All admired this woman, thus nobody imagined that she would die in such a horrific manner. Yolanda lived in Albany, Georgia, a community that was considered as reasonably secure. In the Wild Pines complex, she lived in apartment 403. Every day she was out and about and left her neighbors with a regular sight to remember. Yolanda was an outgoing person, so it wasn't usual for her to go extended periods of time without speaking with her family, neighbors, and friends. It was therefore strange to her daughter, Katie Freeman, and niece, Danielle Woods, that on Friday, November 6, 2009, it had been a whole day, and she still hadn't spoken to them. During evening of the same day, Katie and Danielle made the decision to drop by Yolanda's house to see how their dear mother and aunt was doing when she failed to respond to her daughter's and niece's multiple calls to her landline telephone. The cousins, though, had no idea that they were about to be met by the worst moment of their lives. Katie and Danielle went inside and called out for Yolanda, but she didn't respond. As Katie made her way through the apartment and into her mother's bedroom, she came across something that she would remember for the rest of her life. On the floor, partially out of the closet, Katie discovered her mother's lifeless body lying. She was wrapped in a blood-soaked, crimson-stained bedsheet. Katie screamed, and Danielle hurried over to find out what occurred. After being taken aback, Katie ran to the home phone and called 911. Soon after, police showed up and realized right away that this was a homicide. Crime scene investigators were notified, and the apartment was sealed with yellow caution tape. Yolanda seemed to have been fatally stabbed before the perpetrator tried to force her into the closet. Unable to get the body all the way in, they poorly wrapped it with a sheet and then fled the scene. During an autopsy, the cause of death was found to be stab injuries to the abdomen. Investigators started the forensic examination in the apartment while attempting to gather as much information as they could from neighbors, friends, and family. In the meantime, Katie noticed that Yolanda's vehicle, a white four-door Buick LeSabre Custom from 1997, was not there. The police officers started looking for the missing car, and less than a day later, they located it. On the day of the incident, an abandoned car had been reported to the authorities by a woman named Saralyn Daniels. Daniels allegedly noticed the car parked at the back of her house. Daniels reported this suspicious car, having no idea that it would be the subject of an investigation in connection with a homicide. Officers responded to the location and verified that the vehicle belonged to Yolanda Roundtree. The car was then taken to the impound lot by the police so they could inspect it for bloodstains, dust for fingerprints, and look for any potential evidence related to the slaying. Despite their best efforts and the evidence recovered from Yolanda's apartment and her stolen car, it was still not enough for detectives to identify the suspect. Weeks, months, and years passed, yet there were no leads in the case. Over the years, Yolanda's family endured suffering, unaware of who could have taken away their radiant and joyful matriarch. Eventually, the case went cold until February 2023, when investigators reopened it and asked the public for information. At a press conference early in 2023, Yolanda's daughter and Katie stated, "I want the killer to be caught. I want to keep them off the streets." Katie would go on to say that she simply wants closure after all these years so she could have a good night's sleep. In February 2023, Detective Terrence Bryant of the Albany Police Department announced that they had gathered fresh evidence, which was scheduled to be sent to the crime lab of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation for DNA testing. This, along with the numerous tips that came in following their public appeal for information, would be what ultimately put a name to Yolanda's killer. On April 13, 2023, 64-year-old Annie Dolores Fritz was apprehended for taking the life of Yolanda Roundtree. Presently, Fritz is being held at the Dougherty County Jail. In addition to the murder, she is also accused of aggravated assault with a cutting instrument and tampering with evidence. While the trial is still pending, no other information, including the motive behind the murder, has been made public. Yolanda left her family with a legacy that they would never forget. The loving grandmother and mother showed to her family that perseverance pays off. Over the previous 13 years, Yolanda's family members, especially Katie, never gave up. Now that the time has finally come, they have the chance to piece together the closure they have been waiting for so long. In order to make sure Fritz is imprisoned for her heinous acts, Katie and others intend to attend the hearing. Investigators still urge the public to come forward with any information they may have, even though they believe they have captured the person responsible. For information regarding Yolanda's case, please contact the Albany Police Department at 229-431-2100. On a humid summer night in Jacksonville, Florida, a chilling discovery was made in a courtyard apartment on King Street. Valerie Ames, a 31-year-old mother beloved for her vivacious spirit and outdoor adventures, was found lifeless, her body telling a tale of violence in the silence of an apartment that wasn't her own. As the dawn broke and the city awoke, the mystery deepened. Valerie had no known reasons to be in that neighborhood. Who brought Valerie to this foreign apartment? What secrets did the walls of the unoccupied dwelling hold? Join us as we peel back the layers of this gripping saga and unravel the enigmatic circumstances surrounding Valerie's tragic demise. Valerie Ames, who was 31 years old, liked spending time outside, especially going camping and horseback riding. Even more, she loves being with her two young daughters, Pamela and Michelle. The very last memory Michelle has of her mom was of sitting on her lap at her 5th birthday party, a Barney the Dinosaur-themed celebration. After that, Michelle and 9-year-old Pamela traveled to England with their grandmother and never saw their mom again. On August 10, 1996, Valerie's lifeless body was found in a pool of blood. She had been battered and fatally stabbed. In Jacksonville, Florida, her body was discovered inside one of the courtyard apartments on King Street. It wasn't, nevertheless, Valerie's place. The evening before, the man who resided there was apprehended by the police. His daughter went to check on his apartment where she came across Valerie's dead body. The apartment's occupant was ruled out as a suspect, given that he was in the custody of police at the time of the slaying. Moreover, he had no connection to Valerie, and when her photo was presented to him, he did not recognize her. Valerie resided in a suburban community of Arlington and didn't own a vehicle. She had no known reason whatsoever to be in that area of Jacksonville, and there weren't any apparent means by which she could have gotten there, suggesting that the suspect would have taken her to the temporarily unoccupied apartment after its resident's arrest. Also, one of Valerie's daughters informed detectives that 3 months before her mother was slain, she had reported to being assaulted by a law enforcement officer. After initially speaking with the police, Ames' cooperation wavered and no charges were ever brought. Following Ames's demise, that officer was investigated but was cleared. James claims that they have been informed by others that their mother was expecting a child when she was slain. However, the police claims that there is no documentation of that in the case file. A woman allegedly approached the authorities, claiming that she had information on the case and would make a deal with them, said James. Though not too long after she reached out to the authorities, that woman was discovered dead, but I'm not sure how she passed away. Neither the lead nor the charge ever yielded anything. Eventually, Valerie's case was abandoned. Her daughters grew up, and Valerie ended up with 6 grandchildren, none of whom ever had the opportunity to meet her. Just over 10,000 days after Valerie's death, on April 2, 2024, Jacksonville Sheriff T.K. Waters announced that 69-year-old Jerry Phillips of North Carolina had been taken into custody and was being charged with second-degree murder and sexual battery in connection with Valerie's case. the Florida State Attorney's Office was going to prosecute him. Many specifics concerning Phillips's identification are yet to be released by the Sheriff's Office because of the ongoing legal proceedings. State Attorney Melissa Nelson claims that further details will be released to the public after Phillips's indictment and that the evidence against him has been formally submitted, making it accessible to Phillips's lawyers. Sheriff Waters acknowledged that the identification was made possible by technological advancements along with the dedicated investigative work of the officers in the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department's cold case unit. He added that Phillips was not completely unfamiliar with Valerie, albeit we weren't able to ascertain how precisely she knew him. Valerie's mother, June, was still alive to see the arrest made in her daughter's case and issued a statement to be read aloud at the news conference. Valerie's daughter, Michelle, attended the press conference and delivered the statement that said, in part, "These lengthy years have done nothing to numb the pain of losing her mother so violently. Every day, her suffering and torment have become our own. As we stand here today, nearly 28 years later, we finally have some answers about our beloved mother Valerie and a chance for her to get justice. Lastly, may our mother rest in peace." As we close this chapter on the chilling case of Valerie Ames, one can't help but ponder the mysterious and serpentine paths that led to this long-awaited arrest. How did Jerry Phillips elude suspicion for nearly 3 decades? What crucial piece of evidence turned the tide after all these years? And what about the unnamed woman who came forward with information only to meet a tragic end herself? What secrets did she hold? We invite you to share your theories and insights. Could there be more to this case waiting to be uncovered? Engage with us in the comments below and let us know what you think happened in that fateful apartment on King Street. Your interaction could shine a light on facets of the case that even the authorities might have overlooked. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of cold cases.